If you're watching this on the Legacy of Survival channel, make sure you hit subscribe right now so you don't miss the next deep dive into the real strategies that kept ordinary people alive in extraordinary times. Today, we're getting into something that serious historians and survival-minded viewers always ask about: how regular families, not soldiers or governments, actually kept themselves fed during the hardest years of the Second World War. Long after supply chains collapsed, towns were cut off, and rations became nothing more than symbolic paper. These methods weren't fancy, and they weren't romantic. They were practical, relentless, and often brilliantly improvised. If you understand them, you understand the backbone of civilian resilience in the 20th century. How people mastered quiet, small-scale food production in hidden spaces. In blitzed cities from London to Warsaw, gardens became currency. People grew food in courtyards, rubble patches, abandoned lots, and even on rooftops where soil had to be hauled up in sacks. The real advantage wasn't just the vegetables themselves, but the diversity. Cabbages, beans, potatoes and beets were planted together to maximize space and harvest windows. Modern viewers can take this same principle and apply it to balconies, small yards, or even community garden plots. The key is layering fast-growing crops like radishes and leafy greens between slower, calorie-dense crops. WWII families didn't talk about companion planting, but they practiced it instinctively because it made every square foot count. How ordinary households revived pre-industrial methods of food stretching. Food stretching wasn't about deception. It was a mathematical survival tactic. Families learned to turn small amounts of fat, grain or meat into meals that lasted days. In many parts of Eastern Europe, a single chicken could provide broth, fat for cooking, meat for several stews, and bones for gelatin to thicken soups. This wasn't culinary theory. It was the difference between hunger and stability. You can adapt this today by treating staple ingredients as multi-use assets. When you cook something at home, ask how many applications you can get from it instead of treating each ingredient as a one-and-done purchase. How people relied on quiet networks of barter that function like underground economies. Barter wasn't casual, it became the backbone of food acquisition. Rural families often exchanged eggs or milk for soap, cloth or fuel from city dwellers. These networks ran on trust, secrecy and consistency. Today, the equivalent might be local producer groups, trading garden surplus with neighbours, or forming regional exchanges with people who raise poultry or keep bees. The principle is timeless. Diversify where your food comes from, so no single disruption hits you too hard. Entire communities, revived what were nearly forgotten fermentation skills. Back in the 1940s, fermentation wasn't just some culinary trend, it was a real preservation necessity. Sauerkraut, kvass, pickled beets, sour rye starters and fermented dairy, well, these kept calories usable without the need for refrigeration. During the siege of Leningrad, families actually survived whole winters because fermented vegetables managed to hold on to their vitamin C, even when fresh food was nowhere to be found. If you're thinking of putting this knowledge to use now, just start with one simple fermentation, cabbage, dairy, or a bread starter, and treat it the way wartime families did, as a renewable food source, not simply a finished product. People managed, quite skillfully, the art of collecting calories from the wild without drawing unwanted attention. Urban foraging might seem like a modern idea, but honestly, it was a wartime lifeline. Nettles, dandelions, wild berries and tree nuts, these all supplemented rations across Europe and Asia. The real key was a solid familiarity with local plants and the discipline to harvest them responsibly. For you, as a modern viewer, the lesson isn't to just wander into the woods guessing at what's edible. It's to actually learn your local ecology, perhaps through classes, books, or guided walks. WWII survivors didn't gamble with guesswork. They identified a handful of safe, reliable plants and simply stuck with them. Folks preserved food with low-fuel methods that didn't require any electricity at all. Smoking, sun-drying, salt-curing and low-temperature dehydration were absolutely widespread, especially in rural communities cut off from the markets. In Greece and the Balkans, fish were dried on lines strung between damaged buildings. Over in the Pacific, sweet potatoes and taro were sliced thin and dried for months of storage. The principle for modern use is really quite simple. Choose a preservation method you can maintain with minimal energy. Sun-drying tomatoes, apples or herbs is still perfectly viable in many climates, and even small smoking setups can run with scrap wood, just like wartime families did with broken branches or fallen debris. How root cellaring became one of the most effective low-tech solutions. Whether it was a true cellar, a dugout pit, or perhaps just an insulated corner of a basement, you see, cool storage made the difference between spoiled food and months of reserves. Potatoes, beets, carrots, onions and apples lasted well into spring. Families monitored humidity and ventilation without modern tools, just observation and routine checks. If you have a basement, garage, or even a buried outdoor container, you can replicate the same effect. Keep temperatures stable, keep produce dry, and organize it so older items are used first. Now let's talk about how World War II families turned fuel scarcity into a strategy, not a setback. With coal and firewood rationed, most households couldn't cook multiple times a day. They adapted by batch cooking large pots of stews or porridges that could be reheated quickly, saving calories and fuel simultaneously. Many even wrapped pots in blankets or hay to retain heat, what we now call thermal cooking. A modern version could be slow cooking a large pot once and portioning it out for days, cutting energy use and reducing dependence on daily shopping. Oh, how people relied on cooperative cooking to stretch resources and reduce risk. In bombed cities, neighbours pooled what little they had. One family might have potatoes, another a bit of lard, another a handful of grains. Combined, they created meals none of them could have managed alone. This wasn't charity, it was structured cooperation. The lesson for us today is straightforward: resilience improves when you're connected. Whether it's partnering with one or two trusted households or joining preparedness groups. Food security becomes stronger when resources and skills are shared. If you want more historically grounded survival knowledge that actually mattered to the people who lived it, subscribe to the Legacy of Survival channel, share this with someone who cares about real history, and stick around for the next deep dive.